So, welcome everyone. Our speaker tonight is Dr. David James, and his talk is titled Chase, Tag, Adopt: The Evolution of Tracking Monarch Migration in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, many of you, I'm sure almost all of you, if not all, know David. He's an associate professor in entomology at Washington State University, based in Prosser, Washington. He has been researching the breeding ecology and migration of monarchs in the western US, and he'll talk to us tonight about an amazing new tool that he's been using. So thank you for being with us tonight, David.
Thank you. I will go ahead and try and share my slides. Okay. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
I can.
Okay.
Looks great.
All right. Well, thank you for coming to hear me talk about the monarch once again. I usually try to make these talks exciting about the monarch, and I really don't have to try too hard tonight because it is exciting. The endpoint that I'm going to talk about, the adoption, the new technology. But before that, I'm going to walk us through the evolution of tracking monarch migration in the Pacific Northwest, hence chase, tag, and adopt. And the chase is, and I hope Bob's here, I didn't see his name, but Bob started the whole idea of tracking monarchs, I think, from the Pacific Northwest anyway. I arrived in Washington in 99, and this was the year that this book was published. I didn't get to read it till 2003, but it's a great book. If you haven't read it, you should. It's timeless. It's never too late to read it. Basically, Bob migrated with the butterflies or passage, as they called them, from British Columbia to Mexico during the fall of 1996, monarch by monarch, following the trend to see if he could detect a trend and wandering with the wanderers. And of course, I came from Australia where monarchs are called wanderers. So that's the chase part. I'll talk about that more in a minute. The tag part is, we'll focus on my work, the tagging program that I've talked about at this venue many times in the past, our WSU Monarch tagging program. Um, so I'll talk more about that. I'll summarize the work that we've done with the paper tags. We've achieved a lot. We've found out a lot. And then finally, I'll talk about this new amazing technology that we are calling Adopt, as you'll see later on. And that's a monarch there with the radio transmitter on its thorax. And this has all happened within the last 12 months. In fact, 12 months ago, didn't really know about it. It wasn't until last fall that it started happening. There'd been a few trials in previous years, but with um, limited coverage, and also some of the transmitters were too large. So it took a long time to modify and to get it down to a tool that we can use effectively. And so I'll talk more about that later on. And the Dr. Monarch website is down there, and I'll talk more about that obviously as well. So beginning with chasing monarchs, as I mentioned, it was one man's chase from BC to Arizona one autumn last century. I think it was 96, and a 9,500-mile journey with monarchs as his navigators. So it's a unique thing to do. And I was fascinated reading it. It really, having come from Australia and worked on monarchs there back in the 70s and 80s, it reignited my passion for monarchs again. So this is from the book, and it shows the route that he took because he was following the monarchs, and so started up in BC, down through Washington, and bit of Oregon into Idaho, down into Utah, and then on the second page, all the way down through Utah, Arizona, and to Mexico. And these are all the locations that are numbered where he actually saw monarchs and got his cues from as to where he should go to next. So what did he find? Basically, summarizing everything, I think the quote there is towards the end of the book. Not all monarchs west of the continental divide migrate to California, which is what people thought before, without any real evidence. He thought some flew south to Mexico, and so this figure here from the book shows the bearing. So when he saw a monarch, he recorded its vanishing bearings, the direction it was last seen. And this is the summation of all the butterflies he saw. And so you can see, um, a lot of them went south rather than southwest. And this shows it better. This is another figure from the book showing the vanishing bearings. And you can see, the numbers here are the number of butterflies seen. And you can see most of them were going south or southeast, and very few were going west or southwest. So, that intrigued me reading this book, reading his book, that it wasn't all, a slam dunk that they're all flying to California as we thought or people thought. So he was also a visionary, Bob, and we know that he's a visionary. And so he had this feeling that a lot of the population or some of the population did not go to California. He didn't know how many, and even if it was really true, because he didn't prove it, but it was his observations were suggestive that it happened. And so, he said perhaps someday there will be a recovery in Mexico from Okanagan or Maryhill or Farewell Bend, and then we'll know that Northwest monarchs go to Mexico too. And then he said new tools would be brought to bear. And that's what I'll be talking about later, because new tools will be brought to bear, and they've got a good chance of answering this 25-year-old question within a season or two, maybe, within the very first year. So it is exciting. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, there's other strategies as well. But he finishes with the combination of the net and sticky tag. The sticky tag has given us a lot of information, but not hasn't solved the mystery of whether some of them do go to Mexico. And I'll talk more about that in the tagging section, which is now apparently the conventional tagging, I'll call it. And it started in 1937 with the Urquharts, not in Pacific Northwest, but they're Canadians, and most of their work was done in the eastern US, but they also did some work in the West. So they were the pioneers of tagging, Fred and Nora Urquhart, um, and the pioneers, as I said, and it culminated in the front cover of the National Geographic in 1976, when their tagging resulted in the discovery of the Mexican overwintering colonies. So, conventional tagging did actually solve that problem. As you can see in the inset there, their tags were actually on the forewing and wrapped over the wing. But they work well. I mean, we've changed now, as all know. But yeah, they were the pioneers. They started the tagging, the conventional paper tagging strategy. So in the West, we haven't, sorry, go back. There's been some tagging, but it's mostly been tagging of overwintering butterflies in California. There hasn't been much tagging of monarchs, or particularly in the Pacific Northwest, in the fall, the migration, the autumn migration. Not much of that has happened at all until I came on the scene, basically. So the overwintering tagging did actually provide some good data on post-overwintering migration. That's the only data we have, showing that they migrated out in multiple directions, not just north, but east and maybe south as well. So it was valuable, and the various programs are listed at the bottom there. But all of those are defunct now, as far as I know. Nobody's doing it. Well, actually, in California, you're not allowed to unless you have a permit. So that's probably dissuaded most of the conventional tagging. But I think before that came into, um, you know, before that happened, most of these tagging programs had ceased. So, getting to my story, almost 50 years ago, this is actually my 50th year of working or being mesmerized by Monarch, should I say. It took me a couple of years to actually, I think I published my first paper, scientific paper on anything, on monarchs, an overwintering colony. So a new overwintering colony in the west of Sydney, and that was 1978. So 1976, I arrived in Sydney and was mesmerized by the monarchs flying around, because I'd grown up in England and they were just a fantasy because I'd never seen one. Um, so anyway, I I commenced a master's, but then got converted to a PhD. A lot of work and and I've talked about this before, I know, um, but the migration of monarchs there was unknown. It was assumed that it did happen, but there was no evidence that it did. So that was my first monarch mystery, solving it by tagging. Um, so because I'd read the Urquhart's papers and Lincoln Brower, all the other famous monarch people in the US, and decided to do their things over there. And so, but I couldn't get hold of the tags from the US. And so I got these little circular tags from news agents, we call them over there, where they sell papers and stationery type stuff. So I got these sticky labels, but I had to write the tags. I had to, with a waterproof ink and fade-proof ink, I had to write my own tags. And I remember vividly, spending all evening and half the night, writing these tags and dreaming of the day when we could track monarchs electronically. I had this dream. I guess I watched too much Star Trek or something, but it was a dream of mine, how good it would be if we could do that. And as you'll see later on, we've reached that point, and I'm still alive. So, it's a real big moment for me personally, as well as the monarch world and beyond the monarch world, actually insect migration and dispersal. So we've come a long way since 1976. So, and there's, I because we needed people to find the tags, and we still do today, the conventional tags. I got a lot of publicity, and it was very easy to get publicity in Australia from newspapers and radio and TV. I was flat out answering all the calls. So, and so I actually found this image online, a media image that I'd never seen before of me applying a tag to a monarch wing, in the conventional way that we use now, on the hind wing. And some of the publicity, reached the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. And this is a picture of my 4-year-old son. He's now 50 this year, obviously. So, actually more now, I think. So the publicity was really good and got a lot of attention. We had got a lot of recoveries. So apart from all the other work I did in the thesis, we proved that migration did occur in Australian monarchs. And this was the most impressive release, where we released them in Canberra, which is like 200 miles away from Sydney and 250 miles away from Newcastle, New South Wales, where we had the longest flight, and all these other flights. And they're all flying to the northeast, which is the inverse of, flying to California from Washington, where, most of it, as you'll hear about, most of our monarchs do fly to California, from Oregon and from Washington anyway. But they're in, Australia's in the southern hemisphere, so they're flying in the inverse direction. So the tagging worked in Australia. So as I mentioned before, there was no organised full tagging in the Pacific Northwest last century, except for some ill-advised tagging of monarchs relocated from other places like the eastern US and Canada and California. Like they took them from overwintering sites and transferred them back to Idaho and Washington, and to see if they go back again. Things like that, which didn't really prove a great deal, because you really need to tag, or use the monarchs that are in the area, not been relocated there. However, there was two school teachers in Boise, Idaho in the 70s and 80s, independently of each other, that did a lot of tagging with school kids over a number of years. And recoveries were made in California. And this not very good figure down the bottom here shows some of their recovery lines. So you've got three going that way, and then you've got another one going straight south and another one going southeast. So even with their work, well, their, I don't know if they called it work, but their passion and their teaching, it wasn't just this, everything went to California. Even though, when people are reported on this, they tend to, look at them going to California and thinking that these are oddities. But they mean something. So they played a big role. Okay, so this is the fish patch, and you'll have to read Bob's book to know what that means. But it's a place at Roosevelt, Washington, which is in the Columbia Gorge, about 45 miles east of the Dalles. I've been there many times in recent years, and it's still a good monarch spot. There's lots of narrow-leaf milkweed there, as you can see in the picture. And anyway, back in 1997, the year after Bob did his trip, his chase, um, David Branch, a friend of his, caught a monarch, and Bob tagged her with a monarch program, one of those programs I mentioned on the other slide that mostly did California overwintering tagging. He tagged this butterfly. It had a 1-800 number, and then 4 weeks later, approximately, it was found in California, and this is the first Washington monarch recovered in California. Wild monarch. And actually, to this very day, I think it's the only one because, as you probably already know, and I'll tell you about in a minute, all of our monarchs were reared, reared locally, so they were, local monarchs. But we didn't actually we did tag wild monarchs, but we never got one back from California. I don't think. I might need to check that. But so anyway, his was the first evidence that a Washington monarch would fly all the way to California, Santa Cruz. So, 2003, I read Bob's book and his findings resonated with me. I wanted to prove the nature of monarch migration in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, why wouldn't I? After reading the book, I was just, that's what I wanted to do. But, you know, Bob beat the odds by that one tag. Normally it takes 200, with all the monarchs that we've tagged, it's about 1 in 200 that gets recovered from a long distance, i.e. California. And so, unless you're really lucky, as Bob was, and if you want to collect data that's significant and scientific, a lot of data basically, we need to do something else. And finding migrating monarchs in the Pacific Northwest is not easy. I mean, it wasn't then. It's even less easy these days because the numbers are even lower. And we could, even back in 2003, we could never tag enough wild monarchs to get the recoveries needed. We might tag 200 at that time, I estimated. But that would mean one recovery if we had a good year, or maybe a couple if we're really lucky. So, that's not good enough. So I put it on hold for a while because I decided I needed to mass rear monarchs, to have a lot more monarchs in the game. But as most of you know, I'm a WSU entomologist, not employed to work on monarchs, but to work on biological control and pest management in vineyards and hop yards. So at the time, it wasn't a feasible use of my time. However, I like to say that these days it is. They don't mind me working with monarchs anymore. So things have changed a lot in 20 plus years, which I'm pleased to see. So one day in 2011, oh dear, I think I've clicked on something. One day in 2011, Tamara Russell from the Walla Walla Penitentiary, she was a mental health specialist. She rang me and wanted something to do with butterflies that would engage the inmates at the prison because being in prison apparently is boring, and it affects your mental health, and so that's what she was there for. And she just had this idea. Maybe she heard something about the work that I did. Um, Knew that I was a butterfly person. So she had this idea, and immediately on that phone call, I still remember it, the light bulb went off in my head, thinking, wow, maybe we can get prisoners to rear monarchs. That would be legitimate, and I'm sure nobody will complain. My department chair, etc. So thus began, and I've spoken about this before. Many of you have heard me talk about incarcerated citizen science, which led to the understanding of migration of the monarch butterfly in the Pacific Northwest. It was a proper project, except unfunded. I mean, all of this work has been unfunded. It's all to do with citizen science, and I can't thank citizen scientists enough for all the work they've done for me and with me over the years in this project and in other projects too. So this is Walla Walla Penitentiary, where all the rearing was conducted during the years of 2012 to 2019. And it only came to a halt because, in my view, the short-sighted um, um, well, basically, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife wouldn't allow us to do it anymore. There's no easy way of saying it. It wasn't permitted anymore. And so the prisoners had to go back to looking after puppies and cats instead of rearing butterflies, which I know they preferred to do. So butterflies and convicts is a strange partnership, but it worked really well. And we had many stories from this. I mean, it was written up in a citizen scientist book, or a book on citizen science, should I say. There was a good chapter in that on it. And it is, one of the success stories. It's a remarkable thing. And the professor got to go to jail as well. I mean, I didn't really want to, but I had to. And I was surprised at how engaging these people are. These are all life prisoners. They're still there. They're not getting out. Apart from the guy on the right here, he was a young guy, as you can see, and he got the chance to move to another prison. And because of the work he did here with the butterflies, he actually studied for a master's, I think, and hopefully he's not in prison anymore. But most of the other guys were there for life. But they were just so attentive, as you can see, and dare I say it, loving towards the butterflies. They hated to hurt the butterflies, and they treated them like gold, basically. And they were the greatest rearers. They did the best. I mean, it's a cliche, and I always say it, but they had time on their hands, and so they had plenty of time to attend to the caterpillars. They did not allow frass to build up. Cleanliness and hygiene was incredible. So we had great survival. I think it was something like 80, 90%. And when I did it, it was more like 60%, and most people 50%. So, they really did an excellent job at rearing. So we had our mass rearing. And we used wild gravid females obtained in the Pacific Northwest. In those days, we could do that pretty well. I could go to Crab Creek 20 years ago and collect females easily from June onwards, and start a program. Couldn't do that these days. They don't turn up in the same numbers. Some years they don't turn up at all. So the WSU Monarch tagging program started in 2012, and it's still running, not in Washington, Oregon mostly, and Oregon and Idaho, but not Washington because of the regulations here that they won't provide me with a permit anymore. Very short-sighted, I think, but for most of that time we did Washington, and we got a lot of data, as you'll see. So yeah, citizen scientists, I've already mentioned them, and they are the driving force behind the tagging program. I mean, it couldn't have happened without them. We have an army, we had an army, we still have an army in Oregon and Idaho that do tagging for us, the conventional paper tagging. And they love doing it as well. They get a lot from it. And it's, we get data. We're still improving the data that we do have. Um, so the inmates and the other and the citizen scientists not in prison, um, have done remarkably well. It's an extraordinary network that we created of citizen scientists. And as I said earlier, there's never been any funding for this WSU program, and that's probably unique too amongst WSU programs. I can't, it's normally you have to find funding to do anything. But because all the heavy lifting was being done by by the public, by citizens, we didn't have to get funding. It wasn't necessary. We did have occasional donations, which helped in buying the tags, but that was the only cost really. So, so what did we achieve over all those years? We had a total of 42,249 monarchs. I totaled it all up recently. And mostly, well, these were reared, tagged, and released in the Pacific Northwest during that period of time, right up until last year. And 231, which is 0.56%, were recovered from distances up to 865 miles and more than 10 kilometers. So that's good data. 231. That's enough to write a couple of papers, which we did. But you can see how many we had to rear to get that sort of, data. And we also tagged 1,323 wild monarchs. But disappointingly, we got one recovery. And offhand, I can't remember where that recovery was. Maybe it was California, but I think it was tagged in Oregon. Could be wrong. But that's a minuscule recovery rate and way below what it should be. And it's interesting because in the East, data shows there that reared monarchs are not recovered as well as wild monarchs, when they're tagged, you know. So, so there's a bit of a disconnect there. I don't know why that is, but certainly here, our reared monarchs were very recoverable. That 0.56% is very comparable to the recovery rate of wild monarchs that are tagged in the eastern US. It's between 0.5 and 1%. And that's what we get here, in any particular place. As you'll see in Oregon, it is about 1%. So, yeah, so looking at the states separately, in Oregon, we tagged a total of 15,000, over 15,000 during that period of time. And the recovery rate was 1.1%, because it's closer to California, so they don't have as far to fly. And presumably the mortality rate is much less than flying a greater distance. Washington tagged a similar number, slightly more, 16,000. So we did a lot of tagging, and that was mostly, because, as I said, in recent years we haven't done any. So we did a lot in the years that we could do it, and mainly through the inmates. They had a big contribution to that 16,000. Can't remember how much, but it was significant. And the recovery rate is about 0.32%. We had 51 recoveries. That's pretty good, because we're a fair way from California. That's what we got. The longest distance recovered was from, Washington to far Southern California. I think it was 865 miles. So it's a long way for a monarch to fly. And then we come to Idaho, and this is where the mystery occurs. The total tag there was a pretty decent 11,000. Most of that has been in recent years. We concentrated on Idaho because we haven't really confirmed what they do. And this is the crux of what I'm talking about tonight in solving the mystery with the new technology. We don't know where Idaho monarchs go. We've had two recoveries in California and one in Montana. They're the only long distance recoveries. All the rest are around 100 miles, significant. We've had shorter distances, and they're all south of the release point. And the recovery rate is abysmal, only 12, out of over all these years, and tagging 11,000 more than. and we got a recovery rate of 0.1%. So a lot of them are just disappearing. They're not getting found. So I've speculated before, and I've probably said this before in other talks I've given here, that I think a lot of them are just flying due south. I mean, Bob's work showed that, and our work here is showing that they are flying south. We've found them up to 100 miles south, but then they disappear. And it's not too surprising, really, because they're going across, a place where there's not many people, inhospitable area, hot, arid landscape. Maybe not many make it. But if they do, they're probably going to get to Utah and into Arizona and thence on to Mexico, could we say? So, that has been my speculation, following on from Bob's earlier speculation that maybe Idaho monarchs do go to Mexico. Maybe not the overwintering colonies we know about, but somewhere in Mexico. So this just shows graphically a map, what I've just been talking about with the tags, straight lines, notice, because that's what we have to do. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. We have to draw a line from the release point and then the recovery point. Who knows what happens in between? We don't know, but we will in the future. And that's the end part of this talk. So all the monarchs tagged in Oregon went to California. No, none of them went anywhere else. None went to Idaho or Washington. They all went to California. So it's simple. And the greatest distance was from Sisters up there. That was the line I just pointed out, all the way down to Carpinteria, 670 miles. So that's pretty straightforward. We always assumed that would happen, but it's good to have the data. So tagged in Washington. So we duplicated Bob's single tag, which is along this line here, along the gorge, many times. And these lines are only a fraction of what we obtained over the years. And you can see most of them go to California, all along the coast, different overwintering sites along the coast. But we do have a few odd ones, and there's two shown here. And there's more than that, I think maybe 4 or 5. The first one was Brigham City. It was a rest stop outside Brigham City. And I had to read Bob's book again for this talk the other day. Not the whole book, but I read bits of it. And in part of it, he stops at a rest stop near Brigham City. So I wonder if that was the same rest stop. So there's a strange thing. And I released one from Yakima, and it ended up in Idaho. I think it's Idaho here. Yeah. Yeah, it ended up in Idaho. So that's strange. Why are they going southeast when most of their brethren are going straight south? So then we look at Idaho, and we had the two that went to California. One Santa Barbara, and the other one was a place I can't remember now, but in the state. Not it didn't get all the way, but to the coast, but it was on its way clearly. And then the one that went to Yellowstone a couple of years ago. But then if you look at the inset, you see quite a few. There's 3 there, but there's more that are going straight south. About to Troy and to Potlatch. They're about 100 miles away. Heading in that direction, and then they just disappear. They all just disappear off the map. And in recent years, Patrick Adair, who I'll mention more later in regards to the electronic tagging, because he's a big part of the story, for the last 3 or 4, I've lost count now, he's done a lot of tagging for me. He's tagged thousands of monarchs, and they've all done the same thing as they did early on in this tagging program, just disappearing, and so it continues to this day. And I was really wondering what we were going to do to solve this mystery until the advent of the new technology, which I'll talk about soon. So what's the conclusions? Oops. The conclusions are 100% of recovered Oregon monarchs migrated to California. Nice and simple. 98% of recovered Washington monarchs migrated to California or were en route, looks like they were heading to California. But 2% of recovered Washington monarchs flew greater than 100 miles southeast. So they're the anomalies. And then Idaho, 60% of recovered Idaho monarchs flew south or southeast. So that really, I'm glad I read Bob's book again because it really, I'd forgotten, obviously. You can forgive me, it's 2003 when I read it. And that's what fired me into doing this in the first place. But really, we've found exactly what he suggested was happening. That a lot of them, not just Idaho monarchs, but the monarchs he was seeing throughout the West were flying south or southeast. So interesting stuff. And so we published papers, two papers, 2018 and 2021, with all the data from the tagging. And these are some of the quotes in the paper. In the first paper, there was no Idaho tag monarchs found in California, but two were recovered at locations due south. Half the recoveries of Idaho released monarchs were found south to southeast of release points. And then in the latter paper, the more recent one, increased tagging efforts should reveal the destinations of south to southeast oriented monarchs, which is what we've done with Patrick Adair over the last few years. And it hasn't yielded, the efforts haven't yielded the destinations that we thought would happen. And so, as I said, I was beginning to think we may not solve this mystery. So before I talk about the electronic side of things, what else did tagging tell us? And tagging can tell us a lot more than just how they get from A to B, well, not how they get from A to B, where they go with the conventional tagging. It doesn't tell us how they get there, which is one of the advancements of the electronic tagging that I'll talk about in a minute. But the conventional tagging gave us an early warning that Pacific Northwest migrants may boost the California winter breeding population. This was 2016, 2017, almost a decade now. And at that time, there was some winter breeding in California, mostly around LA, but some further north as well. And then we found a couple of our tags that would, released in the Pacific Northwest, Washington and Oregon, and they were found shortly after tagging at 3 weeks. So they'd migrated down pretty quick, but they were laying eggs in milkweed gardens, one in LA and one in San Francisco. So that's not what was supposed to be happening. They were supposed to be going to the overwintering sites and hanging out for the winter in reproductive dormancy. Both had migrated up to 550 miles, and so clearly they were, there's a syndrome, the migration reproductive dormancy syndrome. So they'd obviously been part of that. But once they got to California, they looked around and changed their minds and decided that reproduction was the way to go. And we didn't know that. We didn't know that our migrants or any migrants from anywhere were contributing to the winter breeding populations. So that was significant, and wrote a paper on that, of course. And they'd abandoned reproductive dormancy in favor of reproduction. So tagging showed us that. And of course, since then, it really was an early warning. The tagging was an early warning because now winter breeding is a much bigger component of the biology, or the part of the biology of monarchs in California during winter. I mean, for example, in 2020, none of our 1,300 Pacific Northwest tagged butterflies that year were found at overwintering sites. That was very unusual because all the previous years, 63% of recovered tags were at overwintering sites. It's a bit odd this happened in COVID year, but there's no link, obviously. But 63% of recovered tags found at the overwintering sites, and then suddenly going to none of them. And instead, 7 tags were recovered, which was pretty much what we would expect from 1,300 being released. They're all made in Northern California or the Bay Area, usually in association with milkweed. We didn't see them reproducing, but they were hanging around milkweed patches, strongly suggesting that they were, not getting on with the journey to the overwintering sites. So, tagging helped explain what was going on. And then after that, I realized at that time that something significant was happening. So again, I recruited citizen scientists in California this time who were great at monitoring breeding populations in some parts of the South Bay of San Francisco. And because they're citizen scientists. They devoted gave their time for nothing, and because like so many people, they're just enthused by monarch butterflies. Um, and we're able to write a paper in short time. We didn't have to go looking for funding and then do it the next year. We did it in the year that it was happening, um, judging by iNaturalist reports and the tagging data. I felt this was happening, so we got onto it straight away. And again, we managed to publish a paper from that. And again, it was citizen scientists. And also, tagging showed us the length of life of migrants and overwinterers, and we know they live a long time. But we got the record holder for longevity. And I checked with Chip Taylor, who knows everything about monarchs in the East, and he's not aware of any monarch in the East that has been proven to live for 10 months. It's widely stated that they live for 9 months, up to 9 months. But this individual here that was found at a restaurant in Cayucas in June 2019 and had been tagged in August 2018, and it was still alive 312 days from release, which is 10 months. So it lived more than 10 months, and it's 10 months, 1 week at that point. So it probably lived for 10 and a half months. It was very battered, as you can see. It's lost half of its hind wing, but it was still alive and flying around and feeding on this flower in a flower box at the restaurant. So tagging gave us that little nugget of information too. Some other things too. I get a lot of questions from people about, sorry, I get a lot of questions from people about does wildfire smoke affect monarch migration? And just going, we didn't set out to prove it, but because I have all these wonderful citizen scientists tagging, it just so happened we had tagging going on while there was a huge wildfire smoke area happening at the same place. And so um, 307 tag monarchs were released into smoky or clean air in Brookings, Oregon, and they were separated in time, a few weeks apart. Uh, um, and of those 307, nine were recovered in California. Um, and so, what's the numbers? So we had four in smoky air and five into the clean air. And there was no difference between the distance they flew or the time that they'd lived for, when they were found. So this is a very small data sample, and it doesn't, you can't hang your hat on that, but it does suggest that smoke did not, in these individuals, affect orientation or survival. They were somehow either to fly around it or through it. We don't know. We will know in the future because we have this new technology that I will talk about at some point. So that, tagging can give us a lot of information about a lot of things. So, and the other, one of my favorite parts about tagging really is the advocacy it brings, and advancing monarch science outreach and advocacy, and getting people involved. And I believe very strongly in this, and it goes back to other things that Bob's talked about, extinction of experience among children, not being able to experience this type of thing, to rear a monarch and to tag it and release it. It's an incredible thing that these children will remember for the rest of their life. And now, today in California, it's outlawed. Although I do know a few teachers there that are just not taking notice of it. But it's not meant to be. And so it's taking away something that is very important. So if our paper tagging program could advance in any way, this advocacy and outreach, then it's a plus plus. So this one is a great story I've told before, but I'll tell it again. It's Amelia's monarch, reared and released by these kids in Corvallis, Oregon in 2016, and it was named Amelia after this girl here, I think. It's her monarch, and this is the moment of release. And so, 19 days later, 470 miles, it was found again on the rooftop of San Francisco apartment building. You can see that from the bay in the background. Lisa De Angelis emailed me because she read the tag, which is the email address, and we could tell Amelia that a butterfly was seen in San Francisco. And then she thought it was great. And then it wasn't the end of the story, remarkably. Amelia's monarch went on to tell us something more about monarch biology and what they do during winter, because it flew from San Francisco to the Lighthouse Field overwintering site in Santa Cruz and was found there on October 11th by John Dayton here. So you can see it's Amelia's monarch there. And then later, about a month, 6 weeks later, it was found at Natural Bridges overwintering site, also in Santa Cruz, the famous one where all the people go. But it was spotted there by someone, Elise Townsend, with a good camera and a good um, lens. And then it wasn't the end of the story. There's three major overwintering sites in Santa Cruz, and Moran Lake is the third one. And Amelia's monarch went there just after Christmas. So there was one monarch, four resightings at four locations. And it showed, which we didn't know before, that monarchs travel between overwintering sites. So this monarch, of Amelia's, as well as being something that she will remember for the rest of her life, also taught us, provided us with data on what it actually did after being reared in Corvallis and being released. So, you can't buy this sort of stuff. It's just incredible outreach for the people involved and for other people too, just to listen to it. And the second one is Journey. And Journey was a monarch reared at Sisters Middle Grade School by fourth graders, again 2016. So it was a good year for kids and monarchs. And it was recovered 55 days later and got the record for the migration from monarch from Oregon to California. But the kids at the school didn't leave it there. They were so mesmerized by it that they all contributed their stories to this book called Journey's Flight, which is actually their story of how Journey made the flight all the way from Sisters in Oregon down to Southern California. And they use their imagination. It's remarkable. They need to write another book now once we with an electronically tagged monarch, because you'll be able to then see exactly where the butterfly went, where Journey went, because they just drew a line and followed the line and made up their story from the line. But this was another example of a monarch capturing the imagination of a group of kids, and that's priceless, I think. So other remarkable recoveries were, the prisoners were not left without some reward for all their hard work. They had a number of recoveries. I actually found a monarch here on New Year's Eve on 2015. This is a shopping mall. My family was in the mall and I was outside looking in the trees here where there was known to be a small colony. And I found the tag, one of their tags that they'd released. So I was able to tell the inmates that one of their butterflies had made it to a shopping mall in San Francisco. So I bet they were pleased about that. And then just in Santa Barbara, 800 miles from Walla Walla, I found another one too. So they were thrilled to hear these stories, knowing that their butterflies had made that journey. Okay, we finally got to the game changer, the electronic tagging, which really is a game changer, not just for the study of monarchs, but for study of other large insects like dragonflies, other large butterflies, tiger swallowtails, beetles, large beetles walking along the ground. I mean, you know, the science of insect dispersal migration has been hindered by, not being able to track them very well. So this is a game changer because we can track them now. So there's going to be a flurry of papers over the next few years, not just for monarchs, but for other insects once this technology becomes mainstream. As I said, it's all still very new. Just, even though it's been under development since 2020, again, it was a COVID project when they really sat down to really work this out, to develop something that was light enough for a monarch to carry, So it took about 5 years, but now it's here. So I call it e-tagging, electronic tagging. That's what I've been calling it. But there's other people have been calling it other things. Radio tracking, blue morpho tags, which the tags are called blue morpho, blue plus radio tagging, blue plus tel tel tele telemetry units, CTT tags, that's the name of the company, micro tagging I've seen used as well. So I guess at some point we'll all settle on one thing, but at the moment that's what everybody's talking about in their excitement. And this is a game changer, but it's also excited a lot of scientists too. Um, and so that's good to see. And it's excited the public as well, as you know, because it's an amazing thing. This is how we all get to learn the rest of the story, quoting the broadcaster who I don't know, but I had heard about. And that's a close-up of the shot, close-up of the tag. So you can see it's just fixed on the thorax there, and it's solar powered. So these are solar cells. That's how it works, and that's why it's light, because all previous versions or tags, previous versions of tags had a battery, and the battery made it too heavy. So without the battery, it makes it light enough, and I think it's 50 milligrams. And an average migrating monarch is something like 500 milligrams. So it's it's within the range, yeah, of being able to be carried by a monarch. And as you'll see in a minute, we have the proof of the pudding, if you like, that they can actually fly with it and live with it for their lives. So, as you probably realize by now, our biggest question is, where do most Idaho monarchs migrate to? That is the question. That is, as soon as I heard about this technology, that was the thing that I thought of straight away. Because, as I said, Patrick Adair has been tagging monarchs for at least 4 years now, rearing and tagging, a one-man operation, really, and without result. And so this is we can change that now. And so the tag story, the conventional tag story is, I liken it, and it's not, I didn't make it up. I think I read it somewhere, but it's like the front, if you think of the tagging as a book, we get the front page, which is the release point. We get the back page, the recovery point. We don't know the rest of the story, what happens in between, like in between times. So we have to draw these straight lines. We won't have to do that with electronic tagging. So this is data from last year from the east, obviously, as you can see. And straight lines, not so much, perhaps. They're all heading in the right direction, as you can see, but there's some weird and wacky movements, and maybe the wind, maybe, look at this one here going up over there, but they get back on course again. Who knows what's happening? That'll be something else to work out. But it's not a straight line. There's not a bunch of straight lines. Which is what we thought. And but they're all going to Mexico, so they all know that they need to be heading in this approximate direction. But in actual fact, they're traveling a lot more than the straight line distance. They're doing a lot of meandering in between. So our estimates of the total migration distance are way conservative. So yeah, this is also an example of the fact that these monarchs can carry these tags. So, these colored circles are individual monarchs. So you can see, the orange one got all the way to Mexico from maybe, I can't see where it was tagged, but way up here somewhere, and it got down to Mexico. This is an interim thing. It's not final thing. It was a point in time last autumn when people were getting excited. So Monarch Watch, a famous organization in the East, has tagged 30 tags last year, 30 electronic tags, and 10 of them reached Mexico. That's 1,400 miles from Kansas City, where they're based. So that's the other thing. We don't need to tag hundreds of electronic tag monarchs because we're going to get a better recovery rate than 1 in 200. So if 10 reach Mexico, that's good. I I did a quick look. I think it's not much further than 1,400 miles from Idaho to Mexico. So, they only released 30. And as you see later on, we're going to release 100 in Idaho this year. So we got good chance of having some travel the route that they're going to go if they're going this direction. We don't know yet. So you can see again, it's not a straight line. It's probably straighter than the other the other figure I just showed because they're getting closer. But there's still, I mean, this is a large scale. This is 1,400 miles, so there is, quite a bit of diversion on, around, and it's certainly not a straight line. Um, so, so there's also been some tagging in the west as well. This last winter, at the overwintering sites by Xerces and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, primarily. Um, and this is some of the data obtained, and I just put these together to show, this is a northerly route. So these little dots are the pings that the tag gives to a cell phone or other recording device. We get a ping, and that's mapped on the map, and so you can see it's traveling north. Um, and this one's, was tagged at Santa Cruz. They were all tagged at Santa Cruz, and this one was going south. I mean, there's gaps because it hasn't been pinged for whatever reason. There's some mysteries about all this, but excuse me. And this one's going northeast. So multiple directions, which we kind of knew, but it's great to get the data on that. And this shows it a bit clearer. And I thank Paul Cherubini for making these figures and Diana Mager for helping in that. And this one's of particular interest to me. Again, released at tagged at the overwintering site Lighthouse Field on November the 22nd, Santa Cruz, and then it didn't move off till March, late March, and you can see its route up through San Francisco, and then there was a big gap with no pings. But this again is remotish type country until it was detected again here in early April. And it ended up, and we haven't heard of it since, April the 8th, at Coffee Creek. And that is of interest to me because some of you will know I go down to Trinity, which is here in Coffee Creek, and Eagle Creek, in late May, Memorial Day weekend, to watch the monarchs migrate up the river at that time. And when I go there, when they're migrating and when there's butterflies around, last few years there hasn't been many, but when in the good years, I would see a population that was obviously sedentary, residential, older, laying eggs, and then I'd see another population flying up the river very fast at speed, migrating. So you can see the two different populations, and so this is April the 8th. So obviously, you know, some of them do get there early and produce the first generation, and then the progeny presumably flies off and then joins the migrants that are already en route at that point. So it's kind of filling in the puzzle, and a lot of another piece of the jigsaw puzzle to what we already know, and that's what this electronic tagging will do a lot of, as well as finding new stuff too. This one here, you can see it's following a similar route as the other one until about, till this point, and it didn't go any further. And it's just wandered around, presumably laying eggs around here. And this is what we figured most of them did, maybe some, further to the east, Sacramento, Vacaville, and because there's plenty of milkweed in this area, they're laying eggs for that very important first generation that then produces migrants that come up to the Pacific Northwest. So there's just examples of what we can obtain from this electronic tagging. And then also, I mentioned Diana, who is also another citizen scientist who I've worked with, and she's got a group of people down there, and they banded together, just half a dozen of them, and bought their own tags. I haven't mentioned yet, but the tags cost $200 each. So, you've got to be committed. And they did that. They bought some tags and tagged their butterflies. So this is a genuine citizen scientist effort. showing, and this is, I put these tracks up because they only tagged seven, I think it was. I got it on the next slide, the details, but so tagged at Santa Cruz, and they flew south, unlike the Xerces ones. Um, some of the Xerces did go south too, but um, the citizen scientist tags went south. This one all along the coast, right down to Cambria, which ironically is an overwintering site. And this one too also went south, but followed the highway, name of which I can't remember, but it's the major route down, and which actually the road actually goes this way too to San Luis Obispo. So they both went south and then went back to the coast. So, that's, I'm not sure we really, we haven't done much tagging yet, and there's a lot of them, proportionally that have done this. So maybe it's a more common thing than we realized. And this is citizen scientists work in action. So yeah, so it's a major drive in this research, this group. Seven butterflies they tagged, and five migrated away from Santa Cruz. Three went northwards and two southwards, and two remained in Santa Cruz but disappeared, presumably died. And so yeah, it shows what can be done um, by anybody really, if you're really really motivated to do this. Okay, so I when that photograph I showed earlier a couple of times now with the tag on the back of the Monarch, when I first started showing that picture to people, a lot of people were fascinated and excited and amazed that could work. And maybe, I don't know, that's half, maybe a third, maybe 20%. I don't know. I didn't survey them. But some people thought it looked too cumbersome, wasn't very good for the monarch, and probably we shouldn't be doing that. A bit of negative reaction I had. But this this shows here monarchs still alive 9 months, 9 months after they were tagged back in the US, after having been to Mexico, spent the winter there, and now they're back and they're being tracked. Well, they were March 31st. I think most of them have died now, as we would have expected. But my point is here that the butterfly was able to migrate thousands of miles, 2 or 3 thousand miles to um, Mexico, spend the winter there, and then fly back successfully. And if they were females, and lay eggs presumably. So we still need to, and this research being done on any possible impacts of these tags on the butterflies, but it's looking very like they don't have much of an impact on the butterfly at all. And the benefits we're getting from learning more about their movement, I think outweighs any negative effect that there might be. And I don't really think there is at this point. We can't see any. Um, so, oh, and just one thing I'll mention here, that we, with the tagging we've done in the West, I think the maximum single day estimated travel was like 25 miles. This individual here, which is what we used to think for the eastern monarchs, about 25 to 50 miles a day maximum. But this one flew 353 miles in one day. Maybe it was wind assisted. I think Chip checked it out, and I think it might have been. But that's a remarkable flight in one day. And this is spring, and we thought that they mostly flew next to the ground, very low to the ground. Presumably, this one was up a bit higher and was just taken by the wind. But that's a remarkable, one-day flight by a monarch. Okay, so other questions we can answer with e-tags beyond where they go, and importantly, how they got there, because we didn't know that before. The impact of wildfire smoke, like we can do a proper study on that now. We could, if we wanted to. The impact of OE pathogen, a very important pathogen that a lot of people are very focused on, and its bad impact on migration. I did some brief work with the conventional tagging that indicated, like the wildfire smoke, it didn't really have an effect. Now we could actually prove it with electronic tagging, one way or the other. The impact of rearing on migration. We could do an experiment to compare rearing with wild individuals, to see if there was any difference in the survival and how they behaved, etc. The impact of weather conditions on migration, and the impact of migration timing on success. We think it's important that the timing is right before, so that they can get there before the weather closes in. But a lot of that is guesswork. And there are a lot of late migrants that we assume are not going to make it. But, we could check that with electronic tagging. So it's more than just where they go. And also, an important question in my mind, and a question that I'd be working on if I was in California, oops, back, is, you know, so we did the study on winter breeding of monarchs in California, and I I suspected, well, more strongly than suspected, I pretty much thought that the progeny of winter breeders would migrate northward in the spring when exposed to the cues that cause migration in spring monarchs, i.e., lengthening day lengths and increasing temperature primarily. That's going to affect a monarch, a newly emerged monarch, regardless of its history. But some people pushed back on that and said that may not be true, and therefore these winter breeding monarchs could be a sink, not continuing the migration, not migrating. So I want to prove that one way or the other, and this would do it. Electronic tagging, and I know Chip is interested in that too, and trying to get people in Southern California to do it as well, because this winter there's been a huge population of monarchs in Southern California in the winter, and it's most likely that some of those will head north around about now, to help populate the rest of the rest of the West. Um, but we need to prove that it's not a dead end. So this technology will allow us to do that, and I'm sure someone will do that before too long. And also, what Diana and her group were trying to answer, where do overwintered females go to lay their eggs? That's extremely important, because a lot of the conservation measures, strategies that we're looking at and working on in California involve putting milkweed where we think they're of most use to overwintered females, because that is the critical time. Those females are the vulnerable weak link, perhaps. If they can't find milkweed, then they're not going to produce a generation, and we're not going to get monarchs in the Pacific Northwest. So if we can help them by putting milkweed where they go, which we can find out with the electronic tagging, making sure that those roots have milkweed, then that's going to be a help, rather than just randomly planting it everywhere. It would take a lot of e-tagging to work out what the major routes are, but it's a goal that we should be trying to achieve, and it will enhance our efforts in restoration of early spring milkweeds in California. So the blue morpho e-tags, that's the real, the game changer. As I mentioned already, they're solar powered. They're lightweight, 60 milligrams. That could be 50. I think I saw it 50 of it. 50 or 60 milligrams. It's still light enough. In the conventional tag, the paper tag, somebody said it was equivalent to a person with a bunch of keys in their pocket. This is obviously a bit heavier than a paper tag, but it's more like carrying a backpack. So, I'm not sure I want to migrate to Mexico with a backpack on, but the monarchs can do it. They've proven it. And so the receivers, the technology, prior to this year, it was just Motus towers and other specialized tracking stations. Now, with this new version, the Blue Morpho e-tags, all Bluetooth cell phones. So basically all cell phones. Anybody that's got a cell phone with Bluetooth enabled will, and a monarch is nearby within, there's various estimates as to how close you've got to be, but within 100 yards, I think, something like that. Um, if you're within that distance of a E-tag Monarch, then your cell phone will record, will get a ping. You won't know about it unless you got the Project Monarch app. If you're just a random person, it will still ping on their phone and get uploaded to the Project Monarch app website or wherever. The technology side of this is a bit of a black hole to me personally. I'm still trying to learn, but all I know is that cell phones, anybody with a cell phone, and I'm not one of those people yet, but that might change. Anybody with a cell phone is acting as a receiver for these tag monarchs. So that's why, in those figures with all the little blue dots, it was people that, were along the roads, probably people with phones in their car that were getting a ping they didn't know about that was recording a monarch nearby. So that's a game changer too. That's just made, you recording and tracking the tagged monarch so much more comprehensive than what it was before that. So we have to thank cellular tracking technologies, and they've been working for a while on raptors, other birds, presumably with larger transmitters. Um, so they've been around a while, but this, as I said, the butterfly tracking has only been around um, as an effective tool, 6 months, just over 9 months. Um, so, they developed the Blue Morpho transmitter, and they say millions of smartphones and everyday devices are acting as passive receivers. That's what I just described. Also, with dedicated receivers within the Motus wildlife tracking system, and so that's on its own, that wouldn't be good enough. But it's getting better. There's more of those stations now. Um, so the network provides the level of continuous coverage that no single of array of stations could replicate. There's the millions of smartphones. That's the missing ingredient. Um, and so the mobile app that you need if you want to track monarchs is Project Monarch Science. So you can Google that and find it, and you can download it, and that allows you to track any monarch that's been tagged in the US, not just the ones that will be tagging um, later this year. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so how do we e-tag a monarch? And we haven't done that yet, obviously. And so this will be a learning process for us too. But as you can see, all you people that pin butterflies will recognize this as a pinning board. So ironically, we use one of those to put the butterfly in, and we use these weights. I'll show in the next slide. So there's the board, and there's the butterfly with the weights, the washers on the wings, holding the butterfly down. And funnily enough, we use a glue, a very special type of glue that is used for eyelashes. I had no idea, but apparently that's the best glue to have because it's been proven to be this, the stickiest or the best. So that's what we will have to use, this duo. It's not just any type of eyelash glue, it's this duo glue that we need to use. And then we put a little bit on the thorax. As I said, I haven't done this yet. We'll do soon. And then we have a little bit on the transmitter, the tag as well, and then just put it on the butterfly and wait a minute or so, and it'll be fixed. It's glued to the thorax, and we know from the data it remains fixed for up to 9 months, pending any disaster that happens to the butterfly. Of course, a lot of butterflies have died en route, no doubt, and their transmitters are by the wayside, no doubt. But the transmitter doesn't appear to fall off. And so the reason it looks unwieldy to some people is this antenna or aerial that hangs down from the butterfly along the body. Here it's being held up, but you'll see it on the next picture. So that's an important part of it, and that's very light. Obviously, probably doesn't weigh anything at all. It's just the trans. It's just the antenna, basically. There's another shot. So there's the aerial antenna down there again, and that goes to the almost the length of the body. Um, Clearly an important part of it, and that's what makes it look unwieldy, I think. So I just wish my friend Lincoln Brower was here, who you know, he said, this is what he said: we await the day when technological advances will make it possible to track individual monarchs continuously. The same dream that I had when I was tagging those, writing those tags 50 years ago. And unfortunately, he didn't live to see this day, and so that's a really sad thing. Um, and Chip Taylor, who is still very involved in this, and he's excited, I can tell just from his emails and the way he's following it. He says this is an extraordinary achievement, a game changer. The rollout confirms and challenges much of what we know about the monarch migration and opens the door to questions we never thought we would be able to answer. And that's true. I mean, this is extraordinary in the extreme. So finally, getting on to what we're going to do this year. And so I mentioned briefly, I think, oops, just click something I shouldn't click. Um, so I mentioned briefly that these tags are not cheap. They're $200 each. So that was my immediate worry. How are we gonna do this? Because I don't have $200, and getting funding for anything these days, particularly things that are not agriculturally oriented, um, is difficult, and it takes years sometimes. Writing proposals and getting an answer, and these days of government funding being taken away, etc. It's even more difficult. So Patrick Adair and I think it was his idea. We had this idea of adopting a monarch. So Patrick has an organization called Wings Rising. So it's the WSU Wings Rising e-tagging program. And we're going to focus on Idaho and Oregon. And we're going to rear the butterflies from local butterflies outdoors, as we have done in the past. So that's Patrick's website, Wings Rising. So he's doing incredible things for restoration of milkweed in Idaho and in Washington too, and other states too as well, I think. And without him, none of this would be possible. He's been a prime mover in getting this going, this whole thing. We've talked about it. I mean, I told you he was the person that did most of the conventional tagging in recent years in Idaho. And so he's very motivated as I am, to get an answer to this question. So the aims are, as you know by now, hopefully, to determine the destinations and migration routes taken by Idaho monarchs. That's the prime goal. And as you'll see in a minute, I probably should have inserted the other information earlier, the fact that we've been successful in having people adopt our monarchs, but I'll get to that. So because we've been successful, we can also determine the migration routes taken by Oregon monarchs to reach California, which would be a nice complement to the data that we do have about the monarchs going to California, and we just have straight lines. So we're going to be releasing them in places where we got a lot of data to see the actual routes they do take. And also, by the way, to just determine if they all do go to the overwintering sites or not. We could get more data on proportion of monarchs that form winter breeding populations in California, instead of going to, and probably there'll be other things that pop up too along the way, like length of life. Anyway, so Idaho monarchs, we've got 100 monarchs named and adopted, which is incredible. So at the beginning of this, I thought, when Patrick came up with the idea of adopting a monarch and naming it, I thought, yeah, that's cool, that's good. we might get 10, 15, maybe 20 people, but that will be enough because we only need that number because most of them are going to survive. It's not like, paper tags that are all going to disappear. So yeah, let's do it. So we did. He set up the website. He did everything that was needed to be done. And as of today, we have 167 monarchs named and adopted. So that's beyond my wildest dreams, and every day we're getting a few more. Um, so that is absolutely amazing that all these people and a few organizations, including Washington Butterfly Association, have, forked out money to help this research and to see how their butterfly fares. I mean, that's the other exciting thing. Everybody that's adopted a butterfly has named it, and they will be able to see on their cell phone how it fares when we release it and where it ends up and how long it lives for. It'll be a challenge. It will be, someone's going to be the winner and someone's going to be, a lot of people will be losers. But whatever, we will get data. So this is an exciting, and it's another citizen science thing. This is, as you know, I've been involved with citizen scientists all the time. It's just another way of getting them involved, and in a way that I hadn't thought of before. But it's amazing. So anyway, back to Idaho. We're going to release about 25 butterflies at each of 4 locations, and we're going to release them from mid-August to mid-September. That's the major period for migration, both from our data in the past and also from a recent paper by Chip Taylor showing the migration main periods for eastern monarchs, and I think we'll be pretty close to that here. So these are the provisional sites. A lot of the logistics have yet to be worked out. So anything could change, but this is what I'd like to see. Coeur d'Alene, which is where Patrick's based, will be the first release, and we're probably going to do that on August the 12th, the grand first release of electronic tag monarchs in the Pacific Northwest. So that would be quite an event, I think. And then we'll do some in Boise with a lot of interested people, and a couple of other places in the South. So in Oregon, so far we have 67 monarchs that have been named and adopted that we can use for Oregon. And so, talking about logistics, we have 167, people or individuals or groups of people, organizations have contributed, and they will all get the chance to decide if you want your monarch to be in Idaho or to be in Oregon, because I know, we have a lot of support in Oregon as well that like to see their monarch in Oregon, obviously, and vice versa. So we'll get all that sorted out before the actual release. So 60 was our target. So I came up with the idea of 6 locations, which are the good places where we've had recoveries before. Not so much Portland, but we have, these are also places where we have fantastic citizen science specialists, if you like, that have been involved with monarchs for a long time and are really, involved with the ground roots there, and will help us greatly. So partly we've chosen these places because of that as well. But Portland's not far from Corvallis, where we have had recoveries. I mentioned one already. Bend as well, we've had recoveries from. Elkton, we've had a heap of recoveries from Elkton. And the other, Brookings, Ashland, and Klamath Falls, they've all got good recovery numbers and they've all got good people. So we'll probably use those 6 locations with 10. But we're still, as I'll get to in a minute, we're still asking for adoptions if anybody wants to adopt. So if we can get it so that we have another 5 at each of these 6 locations, that would be perfect. But if we get, a few more, maybe 12 at each location, whatever we get, we'll just divide it between the 6 locations. So this is the website, the Adopt a Monarch. So this is if you're interested in adopting a monarch, this is the place, this is the page, the website to go. Adoptamonarch.org. And this is what you see: help us solve a mystery. And as you have heard, it truly is a mystery. And we have the opportunity to learn a great deal more about what they do just in the single season, you know? I mean, hopefully they live for the winter too. They live over winter wherever they end up. Um, and then in the spring, I mean, who knows? We will find out. So I got this screenshot a couple of days ago. It's 165 today. I looked, it was 167. And so you just click on name your own butterfly and you then get the chance to name it. You give it, your name, and people have just, been very inventive with their names. Um, I think we've only had to exclude one name so far, for political reasons, I think it was. But normally they're named after loved ones, places. You just be inventive. But what do you want to name it for? Um, and and also there's the opportunity to raise, to just donate a small amount. So see, we've only got 50 of 200 raised, but if we get, 150, we could have an extra, we get Linda Butterfly um, on board. So, and that's an example of, of some of the names of the butterflies. So it's an intuitive website, it's very easy to do. And if you've got any excitement or interest in this, just go ahead and do it. So, but the deadline for adopting a monarch is May the 25th. So not long now, 3 weeks maybe. Um, so, but we've exceeded our goal. So if we don't get any more, I'm not going to be upset. As I said, I was expecting 10, 20 at the max. So, you know, it's blown me out the water, really. It's amazing. But it would be great if we could get to 190, which would give it, enough to tag 15 per site in Oregon. But, 10 per site is good too. So I have to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody who has adopted a monarch so far. And I haven't even seen the spreadsheet of all the people yet, so I don't even know who everybody is. I just know of, quite a few who've contacted me, and it's just incredible. And I'm overwhelmed actually at how generous everybody has been, and uh, and I'm just excited. As you hope you can tell. Um, Everyone who's adopted a monarch so far, you will be a part of Western monarch history. And there will be, as you know me by now, probably most of you, a paper will be written, obviously. This is, we're going to find data to publish, I know. And everybody who has adopted a monarch will be credited in the paper for sure. And whose adoption will solve the mystery of Idaho monarchs? You could be the one. I sound too much like a whatever you call it, trying to raise money here. So I think I better stop. I put my money where my mouth is too. So Bella is an adopted monarch, and also the other two, Vanessas and Tanya, are also adopted monarchs. And I think Wobber might have named one after me. I can't remember. So we're all in there. There might be a Bob too. I don't know who named a Bob, but anyway, thank you everyone who's been part of this story, and everyone who's going to be part of the story through adopting a monarch. There's a list of people at the bottom there who I always thank for my monarch work. Everybody, through the years, particularly Bob, of course, who, as you heard, really instigated much of what I've done today over the years. So, and it will be great. It'll be exciting next 12 months, next 9 months. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, David, for your report on such an exciting project. Yes, definitely. Claps. So some questions, some comments. Please feel free to unmute. You go, Bob. You raise your hand, you go.
Thank you. I just have four short comments. David, wonderful talk. Thank you so much. What a brilliant historical overview. And I don't say that just because you were so kind to me, but I do. My second comment is thank
Did
you.
I get it? Did I get it all right? I was worried I
Oh
might.
boy, yeah, you surely did. And thank you so much. The only one thing the first graphic you showed was actually of prior tagging recoveries from my
Oh,
work. Yeah, not from releases.
right.
Those
Yeah,
recovers. And they showed the Cherubini Urquhart releases from BC transfers, as
right,
well as some of the Idaho ones, because the two Idaho teachers, some of theirs were provided by Paul for transfer release, but others were ones I caught right there. So they had both kinds. And then it showed the one that David and I got 30 years ago this fall.
right.
So, no, you had it right. Thank you so much. The third thing is this. Um, just one figure I'd like to mention historically, whom you did not. There actually was an early Oregon PNW monarch migration organization and study run by a guy named Dan Hilburn, who worked for Oregon Department of Agriculture. And I think he got Urquhart tags. I'm not sure where the tags came from, but he did manage some tagging for a while and kept records. And I got tags from him. I didn't do any back there, but maybe I did a couple. I don't know if he ever got any recoveries, but he had a newsletter called 1,000 to 1, I think was the name, because that's what they expected to be the recoveries, one in about 1,000. So I don't know what if Dan's data ever survived or you got it, or if there were any, but there was that early effort that preceded my book. So I just want to mention Dan in the history of this.
Right, thanks. I didn't know about that, I must admit. So yeah, it'd be good to know what if he did. When did he do it? 80s,
Yes,
90s?
yeah, I think in the late 70s and in the 80s.
Okay.
I'll go back to my files and he might still be living. I'm not sure what survived from all that, but it's only of a historical note now.
Right. But it'd be interesting to know if he did have any recoveries.
Yeah, I can't, I really don't know.
He probably
And
would have said, or you would have heard if he did.
I know ours was the first from Washington, but I don't know if
Right.
he had any from Oregon. Oh, the Runquists were much involved with that down at Ashland, because Paul Runquist, excuse me, had a Monarch business there at that time, way back then. So it got a little confused between monarchs, where they came from, and so on. We'll find out the history of that. Just a minor footnote. The other thing, and this is a little more substantive, maybe. Um, I would think that Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife would be sitting there kind of embarrassed right now that they're not part of this study, that they're not taking part in this because they, for whatever reason, you no longer were able to receive the programs. I mean, it's tragic that the penitentiary program had to stop because of that. That's simply tragic on a human scale. To not be taking part now in the cutting edge, that should be embarrassing to them. Now,
Well, I
is
forgot
there
to
anything
mention.
that, let me just ask, is there anything that WABA could do to lobby to get the permit reinstated in case there were any monarchs in Washington? Uh,
Well,
or
there's
what?
there's a footnote, Bob. I should have mentioned that they do. Well, they wanted to tag last year, but there was no monarchs e-tag. They wanted to do it, so they do want to tag, but they only want to use wild monarchs, and they're planning to do it again this year. And they were using me to tell them where the monarchs are, so they will. I mean, the lady, I've forgotten her name, but she's involved in it and wants to e-tag this year, and so.
Julie.
Julie
Julie,
Combs.
Julie Coombe. Thanks, Diana. So yeah, so if there are sufficient monarchs this year, they will do some of their own tagging in Washington.
But they still won't give you a permit to do it.
No,
Now, we can't do anything about that as a group.
well maybe. I mean, in the future, I mean, anything's possible. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, thank you for a wonderful program, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And so,
Thank
and by
you.
the way, people can go online and see these lines in real time happening in the East. I don't think that is available out here. It's pretty fun to watch.
So, John Bauman, you had a question, an interesting question. Why don't you unmute and ask it?
Yeah, my question briefly, David, is how do we know that the electronic tags won't continue to send signals if a butterfly were eaten by a predator and then hitchhiked the transmitter continues hitchhiking wherever the bird goes.
Yeah, that could well happen. As long as the transmitter is upright and receiving the sun, it will continue pinging. So there could be a scenario where that could happen. Hard
That
to
might
imagine.
explain your 350-mile Monarch journey.
Right, yeah, well, yeah. There has been some anomalies, I have to say already, with pings. People have said that's a bit odd, and then it's gone back on course, and so there's some electronic anomalies that happen too. But yeah,
Ah,
what you've said could well happen as long as if a butterfly dies and it's upright in the road or something and doesn't get squashed, it will still keep pinging, during the daylight hours if there's somebody nearby. So, that could happen, but it will just be in the one spot. And we could
right.
actually locate it, probably go and find it.
Yeah, interesting. Just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust you, John.
There was one, by the way, in the east that diverted to, I think it was Bermuda,
Yeah.
and then
Wow.
corrected and came back on course to go down to Florida and on beyond.
Yeah. That's right.
Can anyone hear me?
Barely.
Yes.
I just got two questions. First one, very interesting presentation, even though it was on monarchs. But I like the idea that you had about reared versus wild, released and tagged monarchs. There doesn't seem to be much difference between those two, right?
No, not really.
Okay, so that should comfort some of the people at the state. And the second one was CCTV or no, CCTs that were you talked about Eastern U.S. They were using all wild monarchs. Maybe you could inform them that they could use reared monarchs to make it easier on themselves.
I don't, there's just, the politics of it over there just would not allow them to use reared. But, ultimately they will, because they'll want to answer that question themselves. What happens to the reared monarchs? Because it's a huge political controversy over there about rearing monarchs and how bad it is. But this offers the opportunity to actually prove that one way or the other. So.
Well, what are the California people doing about the ban down there? Are they getting permits for all these Ursies and other releases?
Yes, they've got permits. Yeah. But to get a permit, it takes a long time. It's not just right off for a permit. It's like months to wait.
And it
And
does.
you have to be, not anybody can get a permit. I
No.
mean, working for a university helps, but even that's not guaranteed. So
It's also not cheap.
no, that's right. I had to get a permit for my Coronis work and Monarch work, in years past. And I wrote a final annual report every year. And I had to pay like $150 for the for the privilege of writing the report.
Allison, do you want to unmute and give your experience, which I think is pretty funny?
Hi everyone. I was just sharing that I had followed turtles around and they had these radios about the size of a tennis ball epoxied onto the top of their shell, and then the antenna went around the edge of their shell, and felt kind of bad for them. But this would have been great. However, the solar probably won't work underwater. But I think some people have used the little pit transmitters like they put in fish on turtles to do some tracking. So there are ways, but yeah, it's fantastic to have such a tiny radio for them.
Yeah, that's the real changer, that they made it so small and so light. That's so, yeah, it opens the world for other things for them to be used on other things too.
But David, there was,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Just one last comment is on the Olympic Peninsula right now, there are so many painted ladies, even on the northern beaches. So that kind of makes me wonder, like, where did they all come from? I mean, perhaps from California also, but it seems early to have so many of them here already.
Yeah, I think they
Allison,
did.
there's a lot of talk about that, and we should talk about it tonight a little bit before the end. But should we let David continue with monarchs before we get to painted ladies? I got a couple questions for people about that.
So Carolyn, did you get your question answered about the attachment of the tags?
Yeah, it's always the question that somehow I missed getting an answer, but now I know it's dual eyelash glue.
There you go.
You're right.
So it's like, what are they, little backpacks? What are they doing?
Okay, any other comments, questions? Please feel free to unmute, offer comments, questions. So this is our free-for-all time.
Just this, David, a few years ago, there was some work in the Rockies on Parnassians. Remember, that involved a little bit of transmitting that just was worth about, you could follow them around the meadow. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yes.
What were they using for that? It must have been, it was an early version of this or what?
Yeah, I think it was. They've done that they did that with monarchs too, just, in a field. It must have been a heavier version of the current thing.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, but, I spoke to people at CTT because one of my questions was, can we get it smaller? Because I'm thinking of painted ladies, actually.
Yeah.
So Alison brought that up. And, the current one is too big for painted ladies, I think. But, California tortoiseshells too, two migration that are mysterious to us. His answer was yes, we will be able to get it smaller. So we will be able to do that one day too. We'll be able to tag painted ladies in California and see where they go. Wonderful.
Well, Allison, if nobody else is doing more monarchs, this is a huge year for painted lady immigration. It's an immigration. It's called an irruption, IRRUPTION, from the south. This takes place from time to time when conditions are appropriate, and those conditions involve a nectar supply in the south in the late winter, early spring. Good painted lady year is usually a good nectar year, so it involves rainfall too. And it can involve parasite cycles and the availability of thistles and other food plants and so on. But in certain years, the numbers in Sonora and Texas and Arizona and so on become very, very large, and they erupt out of there. Some people will recall that in, I think, the 1996 eruption, I-5 was closed down in LA by the sheer number of monarchs on the road.
Painted ladies or
We never
monarchs?
had those numbers here, but in 96,
Painted ladies, Bob, painted ladies.
I mean painted ladies, thank you. In 1996, 2002, I think, John, you were saying on the phone the other night, what's the last one you remember that was big? Was it 2010,
2010, I think.
I think? And then this is stacking up as a really big one. Now, there was some interesting email today from Vashon Island. Anybody from the Vashon crew here tonight? Well, on Maury Island the other day, an observer saw over 100. And then the next day there weren't nearly as many. So they can come in waves. I've seen dozens and dozens in Wahkiakum, not hundreds, but people are seeing them everywhere, and they're small now. But they will reproduce, and we'll have big, fresh painted ladies in a month or so.
Hey, Bob, we're getting brand spanking fresh ones already.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen any fresh ones yet. The other day I saw 3 red admirals, so they're also coming in this year. These were all 3 tiny ones in the nettles, and they'll be producing big beauties. But the other interesting thing is, I heard from you, Allison, or if you mentioned it, somebody else did, and from 3 or 4 people now, that they've been, Stuart has been seeing West Coast ladies. And those have been so scarce that some of the people putting together potential vulnerable species lists are thinking about making the West Coast lady a species of concern. Now, that would be a crazy one because it's totally random in what it does, and you can't get any kind of a handle on how you could ever conserve it. They turn up here and they turn up there, but we have not been seeing them much at all. And this year, people are seeing that one as well. So maybe it's going to be a big Vanessa year overall.
Well, it's going to be a big Kaltura year. You know the Hamma fire over on the peninsula 2 years ago? That whole thing is going over with Ceanothus velutinus now. And that's going to be, there's Kalturks all over Canada's area. So that's going to be an explosion on the Olympics like we've never seen before.
Well, they're already there. I was at that Bear Gulch fire a month ago, got to walk around up there, and I saw, oh, a lot. Every butterfly I saw but one was a California tortoise, and the other one was one of the Julia orange spots.
Allison, did that help on the painted ladies on your question on that?
Yes. Well, I was thinking that was what was going on, but it surprised me that they got up here so fast.
Well,
I mean, they were really fast this year.
This is the earliest they've ever gone to our state. We got them in February.
They were very early arrivals.
I did see a red admiral at the tulip show in the Skagit Valley.
Oh, nice.
On a tulip.
Oh, that's amazing. That must have been pretty. Well, I was in the nettles on the whole, stinging nettles, which are the food plant of three of our nymphalids that I call the nettle flies. That's an old English term for the nettle feeding butterflies. I have three also. But stinging nettles are common in many areas, but very rare in the Willapa Hills because of the leaching of the soils from the high rainfall and therefore the absence of nitrogen. And nettles require pretty high nitrogen. But where you find them is around the latrines from the old logging camps and where the animals were in the old farms and so on. But there's one little road, old logging road. It's up above the Willamette, the Eloquman River, east of or just north of Cathlamet, Washington. And I got some habitats up there. One of the places I found the eastern-tailed blue last fall. I went up there the other day, and the bloom of a lot of flowers is very poor this year, I found. And it was not much happening up there at all. But in this one little road, there is an unusual, for here, amount of nettles. And I thought, oh man, I saw a big satyr anglewing fly up right away. And then I found two red admirals. And I might get my first trifecta, all three nettle flies in one nettle patch. Have any of you ever done that? Ever seen all three, the Milberts, the red admiral, and the satyr anglewing in one day in one patch?
I'll do you one better than that. I got Annabella on nettles too.
You got all four in one day?
All four, one day. Moses Meadows.
I saw them all four, as I write about, on top of the butte over there.
Right.
But that was not on nettles. They were not breeding. So you found the Annabella on nettles also?
Absolutely. Reared them through, made them. Well, it's recorded as a food plant. I just never seen them before.
Where was that, John?
Moses Meadows, 83.
Wow. Fantastic.
Amazing.
Well, I'm still going for the trifecta and the nettle flies. Anybody else see West Coast ladies this spring?
Yes, I did. This is Diana. I'm in Santa Cruz.
Yes.
And I've seen several in Santa Cruz this spring.
Good. Because even in California, they've been uncommon lately.
Yeah.
You know what I saw in Santa Cruz was also down in Santa Barbara. Every time on my butterfly big year, every time I thought I was seeing a West Coast lady, along came a black Phoebe and took it.
Oh my gosh.
Every time.
Oh, dear.
Come out there, black Phoebe would be there. Or a Say's Phoebe, one or the other.
Interesting, because we don't have phoebes taking monarchs here in Santa Cruz at all, but we do have chickadees taking monarchs in Lighthouse Field and in Santa Cruz.
Right. Well,
Yeah, chickens, but not black phoebes. Although we have lots of black phoebes at the overwintering sites, we don't see them going after them at all.
they sure go after the West Coast ladies.
Yes, I'm sure. I haven't seen that myself, but yes, that's probably true.
Diana, thank you for all your great updates on Lighthouse and everything else down there. We enjoy reading them.
Oh, good. I'm glad you do. Thanks a lot, Robert. Yeah, I like to send them out to people so they can get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
By the way, the person who asked about birds flying 350 miles because they've been eaten by, I mean, monarchs going that far because they've been eaten by a bird. Unfortunately, since there's no sunlight inside a bird, I think that they probably wouldn't ping. They have to have sunlight to ping.
Yeah, I
And
wondered about that. How long, if once it's covered, how long, whether it's still able to ping? Do you know the technical details on that, David?
Well, I think it has to be uncovered. I mean,
It
inside a
has to
bird,
be.
I haven't been inside a bird. Is it dark? Bit close to the skin.
no
I
sunlight
don't,
there, I'm
I don't know
afraid.
how much radiation is needed. Do you know the answer to that question? How much solar radiation? Did they work on cloudy days, right?
They do work on cloudy days if there is enough light, actually, and if their wings are open. But many of them, when they're overwintering, close their wings, of course, most of
Right.
the time. And so you don't get as many pings when it's overcast as you would on a sunny day. I would say there's a good chance that they will continue to ping for a couple of minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, maybe five if you're lucky.
Well, you
But
know,
the best time to see them is when they're actually sunning
I,
because they spread their wings open and they go 90 degrees to the angle of the sun, right? And so and in the wintertime the sun is low, and so you don't have to have binoculars to see the tag because they reflect the sun so brightly that they shimmer, and you don't even need binoculars to see them from a distance. You just see this flash of light and you know you've got a tagged monarch.
and you don't have to get the number anymore.
Right.
As far as the
As long as you've got your Project Monarch turned on, you will see that ping and you'll know who it is, which number it is, and if it has a name, you'll know that too.
well, I think Groucho Marx gave us the answer to the question, when he said, outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside
Yeah,
a dog is too dark to read.
yeah, yes, a good point. Anyway, it's lots of fun. It is difficult to find them, um, to actually locate them, even though they're pinging very close to you. I've had 2 or 3 people out searching for them when we knew where they are, and only 2 of us have actually found the monarchs due to the pings. So that was a question that David had. He wanted to know if it was going to be easy or not to actually locate the monarch once you've got them pinging. And there is a little bit of a time delay. There's not supposed to be, but there is. At least that's what we've discovered.
Hmm.
A few minutes.
A few minutes.
Yeah.
What happened to the speed of light?
Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to they're supposed to ping every 3 seconds, and then the time that it takes for the ping to get to you is 5 seconds, I think, from the time of the ping. So you should be able to see them immediately, but that has not been our experience. And we've had I don't know 10 easily pinging at the same time at Lighthouse Field in the wintertime. And yet, actually locating them is not easy. But I've had one just fly over my head as I was looking for it, so that was convenient.
That's cool.
And our other gal, she found one that she had named in Cupertino, and it was nectaring on a brittle bush plant in somebody's front yard, and so she got wonderful photographs of it. And one of our objectives is not only to find out what they feed on, what they lay their eggs on, and where, but also what they nectar on. What plants are they using for nectar during their migration?
Right.
And so she was able to determine that. So that was very helpful.
That's great. So David, you and I might be the only two people on this board not in possession of a smartphone.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Is this
Yeah.
gonna make
Don't tell
Come on, you
Diana that.
guys.
She'll go on. She'll
is
go
this
on.
gonna make you
Get
go
with the
dark
get with
side?
the
I'm
system
staying
here.
pure. How about you?
I have a good excuse.
Yeah, you do. But you have the best excuse ever.
Yeah, I know. So I will be getting a smartphone on my birthday, July the 4th.
Okay. I am not on July 19th.
And meanwhile, I have to send him all the reports of all the
Oh, you
ping.
love sending me the reports. I don't need a cell phone. Diana tells me everything. So but I will get a cell phone. Bella's gonna teach me how to use it because I don't have a clue. Mhm.
I think you can get them for free right now from AT&T or something like that.
Well, I
Maybe.
think if I'm gonna get one, I might as well get a good one.
Well, you get an iPhone, the current high tech iPhone.
Well, I'll be looking into it very soon.
Or an Android. My husband was trying to stay pure, but he started having to borrow my phone so he could go to Mariner baseball games because the tickets are all on the smartphone. So I bought him a phone for his birthday a couple years ago.
There you
And
go.
probably
Good job.
uses it more than I do.
I got a little flip phone. I got a little burner phone that I used when I hit a big rock in the Columbia Gorge the other day. But
Yeah.
I don't
You
have.
can't put your Mariner tickets on that little flip phone.
Oh no, I can't do that. No, no, no.
Nope.
Well, and you can't use Project Monarch. And you guys, come on, get with the picture here. You've got to
No,
get
I
to
don't
get
It's like
Project Monarch.
it's like taking pictures. I gave up when it went digital because everybody else is doing it. I don't have to do it anymore. I pioneered that stuff. I don't have to do it anymore.
No, but Project Monarch tells you it allows you to see your any monarch and where they are and how long ago and where they're going and everything. So it's just very exciting because you go to some place and you start getting pings on your phone and you're within about 200 or 300 feet of a monarch that's tagged.
You're,
It's worth getting a cell phone.
you're talking to deaf ears, baby.
Okay. I'm probably older than you are, Bob.
It's not age. It's nothing to do with that. It's how I want to spend my time. And I see everybody else how they spend their time. And I'm not disciplined enough to live with one of those things. That's why I gave up TV in 1969.
No, that's just an excuse. You'll be able to get you'll see. You get that phone and Project Monarch and you're gonna have a good time. It's a lot of fun.
Listen to her. She's still trying.
She never gives up. She never gives up.
Get the clues in her, my dear. No,
Uh,
I'm a net and notebook guy.
well, it was very, very nice to listen to your talk, David, and hear the rest of you as well.
Yeah, so glad you could join us, Diana.
My pleasure.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Anybody want to add anything? Okay, well, David, thank you so much. This is really exciting, and we're going to have another presentation from you when you start getting more data. So I think we've talked about scheduling you for November is what I recall. So we'll have more information on this project, in part just because it's so exciting with this new technology. So I think it's worth having another talk on this fairly soon.
Yeah, well, by October, November, we will have data. We'll have
Yes.
real-time data of what is going on. It could be a terrible flop or it could be wonderful.
It'll be wonderful.
It'll
It'll
be
be
wonderful.
wonderful.
Yeah, I think it'll be wonderful.
I'll be looking over your shoulder, David.
Mm. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you again in September, October when we start up again with our programs. But in the meantime, I hope to see you in the field.
Good field season, everybody.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
happy butterflying. See y'all. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.